Limerick had to deal with the tag of favourites in the Munster final against Tipperary, but this is a different level altogether. So remains to be seen how they deal with that. They haven't made any changes to their team at all from that game, and there's very little surprises with that. Kind of, at a glance, it feels like this is pretty much the same Limerick team as last year, but I suppose due to the fact that all the Napier players had the league this time around, the likes of Will O'Donoghue and Peter Casey have had a chance to work their way into the team. So that of course means that Seamus Flanagan and Darragh O'Donovan, who was so good last year and I thought was in the hurler of the year sort of conversation, there on the bench. So I'm going to talk about the bench. Well, I might as well just now. Shane Dowling, Pat Ryan, Darragh O'Donovan, like three really good players, among others like Seamus Flanagan as well. Barry Nash has talent and I don't think we've fully seen it just yet up to this point. But both teams have really strong benches. Even look at Kilkenny, they've got Bill Sheehan, Bill Ryan, they both came in, did a great job the last day against Cork. James Maher, Killian Buckley can't make the team, Jerry Aylward as well, and a power option in Liam Blanchfield. Limerick are unchanged. Kilkenny have made a couple of changes, and it's like, this is the thing about Cody. He sees things aren't working and he rejigs it. Even if you look at the Cork game, the first 25 minutes, he changed around his backline at least 3 times because it just wasn't working. Pádraig Walsh was the third guy to go on Cadigan. Joey Holden had 3 different guys that he was marking inside the open 25 minutes, and he was in a lot of bother. But as the game went on, they figured it out. They got their best sort of formation, and it worked out as the game went on. The couple of changes they've made, they brought Richie Lahey to midfield. Wally Walsh has got into the forward line, and Killian Buckley, as I said, he's out of the team as well. Very strong half back line, and Conor Fogarty, Pádraig Walsh, Paddy Deegan. Probably not a huge half back line, which is probably not ideal against that half forward line of Groat Hegarty, Kyle Hayes and Tom Morrissey. And you can see that like Limerick will go short and long with the puckouts, but they've got that long option there all day. And we know how good they are at winning breaks on the puckouts too, which they just won constantly against Tipperary. And that went a fair bit towards winning the game, the amount of breaks you get, because all these teams, they measure their appetite and their work rate by their KPIs. Tend to be like, how many 50-50 balls did we win, how many rucks did we win, and Limerick are unbelievable at doing that, as are Kilkenny. So like last year there was 2 points between these teams, and it was nip and tuck towards the very end. Richie Hogan put Kilkenny ahead late on with a goal, and then Limerick turned it around. But Richie Lahey going to midfield from wing forward, I think that's because Kilkenny want more puck out options in the half forward line. We already talked about how their half back line might be in a small bit of bother against that Limerick half forward line, but now that Declan Hannon on either side of him, Dan Morrissey and Diarmaid Byrnes, that's going to be very hard to penetrate. So at least bringing in Wally Walsh, having TJ Reid in the half forward line, and possibly John Donnelly as well. He's a very good hand on him, with the option of bringing out Colin Fennelly too, and even Adrian Mullen, because he's done some great work further out the field as well, and he's been their star young player this year. It is a novice midfield then for Kilkenny, with Conor Brown and Richie Lahey there. I mean, Lahey's had a couple of seasons now. Brown hasn't been used much at all. Surely the plan is going to be to isolate Colin Fennelly on Mike Casey inside and feed a nice low ball in front of him. Last year, Mike Casey, he defused Johnny Glynn in the All-Ireland final, but that was just high ball after high ball all day, and he was just able to spoil him. Be very interesting to see how he does if Colin Fennelly gets ball and turns and goes at him. And from the club final last year, Casey was quite good at times against Conor O'Callaghan, which is obviously a very tough test. And the fact that Mike Casey had to go off the second day sick, that definitely had some sort of a bearing. As I said, both teams have good benches as well. Killian Buckley, you would imagine he would have been like made for this game altogether, because his fitness level and his athleticism would surely lend itself towards shutting down at least one of those Limerick half forwards who are just up and down all day. And of course, if he was to pick up possession following one of those Limerick half forwards back into their own half, he's well able to take a score as well. But he's obviously, based on, I suppose, the performance against Diarmaid O'Keefe the first day when it didn't hamper him, Cody obviously didn't see enough in the Kilkenny game as well to suggest that he's ready for an All-Ireland semi-final. But he's a good option to have off the bench as well. The inside forward line for Limerick, Casey and Mulcahy, they have the pace and the trickery if they get enough ball in there. So Hugh Lawler's a relative novice at this stage of the competition. We'll say he's 23 and he's had a couple of really good games and looks like a great option at fullback. But like Joey Holden, you'd imagine if enough ball goes in one-on-one against those two pacey guys, he's going to have a bit of bother. And maybe even Paul Murphy too. He might match up against Aaron Gallan actually. I mean, that is the key one for Kilkenny. Who do you put on Gallan? So it'd possibly start out with Hugh Lawler, maybe Paul Murphy if he's having bother as well. So they do have a bit of variety back there, but yeah, there's a lot of pace in that Limerick full forward line, and if good ball goes in, there is going to be joy in there. Cody, like as I said already, he changed the back line 3 times against Cork until he got it right. And another thing is, based on a conversation I've had with a couple of people since the the Cork-Kilkenny game, that in the second half, when Kilkenny flooded the middle area and left a couple of their half-backs sit back and not follow the Cork half-forwards out the field, so then there was, you know, if Cork did win the ball around the middle, not only did they have to arrow it into the inside line, they had to go over a couple of spare Kilkenny backs as well. And one thing to note then is that because Kilkenny had spare men covering the middle sort of an area, that the inside backs were actually marking on the outside. So Alan Cadigan likes to get the ball like fired up the flank so he can get it and wheel around in and knock the ball over the bar. But actually he was being marked from the outside, which meant it was harder to play that ball to him, and he still got joy. Like, that's how good he is. But that Kilkenny are, like, there's just constant tactics with them. The idea that they don't do any, like, to be that smart to realise if we've got spare men in the middle, then we can gamble to mark on the outside as well. It just highlights how good they are. And I give Kilkenny a very good shot of winning this. Earlier in the, like, I know Kilkenny have lost a couple of games in the championship this year, losing at home to Galway, of course, stands out, and then losing the Leinster final to Wexford. But they are constantly rejigging their team the whole time, and like even that Cork game was just powerful. The fact that they swatted Cork aside, and you know the Rebels basically gave up in the second half. But this is a fairly imperious Limerick team. You'd imagine they'll just about eke it out, but I can see it being a puck of a ball in it because Kilkenny just don't give up. Look at Tipperary and Wexford. The Tipperary team was released, but the Wexford team, as we speak, hasn't been released just yet. So we'll go on what my guess the team for Wexford might be. So Mark Fanning, Sean Murphy, Liam Ryan, Simon O'Donoghue, Matthew Hanlon, Paddy Foley, Damien Reck maybe might come in for Shane Reck, Dermot O'Keefe, Liam McGovern, Jack O'Connor perhaps, Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor, Kevin Foley will obviously play sweeper, Conor MacDonald and Paul Morris. Tipperary, they've made a couple of changes to the team. Barry Heffernan's been called into the team, and so has Michael Breen. So Breen obviously had a tough time against Limerick, came on against Laois and got sent off as well, but his trust has been restored by Liam Sheedy, even though he came in and had fairly unsuccessful cameo against Laois. The Barry Heffernan one is interesting. That's definitely the one that stands out. Alan Flynn and Ger Brown, they obviously didn't do enough to impress Sheedy in that game against Laois. So the question for this game is, what way have Tipperary looked at the spare man issue? So against Laois, brought John Lennon back as sweeper, which meant Tipp had a sweeper who was Brendan Maher during play. And then when Tipp had puckouts, Laois all retreated, left James Barry on his own and said, you know what, beat us with your hurling if you can. And it probably didn't work out. Barry Heffernan's been brought into the team. So again, now we know that Kevin Foley's going to play a sweeper. Is Davy Fitzgerald just going to mimic what Eddie Brennan did the last day and leave James Barry to take every short puck out? Is there going to be a change? Is there not? Like Tipperary have to find a way to exploit that, because if a team gives you an opening that way, you need to punish it. Whether you do from the start or whether you make a change in the game, that remains to be seen. As I said, Brendan Maher was the sweeper the last day, and I wonder if it might be Paddy Maher this time based on some of the matchups, and I think the matchups are obviously going to be key here. So if I was to hazard a guess at this stage, I think Brendan Maher will go and man mark Lee Chin, because I think he's probably best equipped of all those Tipperary players in terms of pace wise, strength, and Lee Chin is obviously a phenomenal athlete. So if Brendan was able to do it with Tony Kelly, who's a different physical makeup, of course, then I think that's probably the way that Liam Sheedy's going to go. I'm guessing that James Barry will be on Conor MacDonald. Davy Fitzgerald might decide to move Rory O'Connor in there, take a bit of pace in there, and I'm going to guess that Paddy Maher is going to be the spare man. Barrett, he'd probably go on Rory O'Connor if he's not directly closest man to goal, and he may be on him anyway. Ronan Maher may be on Jack O'Connor if he starts, and Heffernan to go on Paul Morris. A couple, like, I'm not sure that Heffernan, Mark and Morris would be the perfect matchup, but just based on going through them for a few minutes, they're the most likely ones I came. And then the matchups at the other end, I reckon Matt O'Hanlon will go on Seamus Callanan if he's out the field, and Liam Ryan will take him if he goes in full forward, and they'll basically swap Callanan and Ford depending on where they're playing. That'll be my guess. I think Sean Murphy might go on Dan McCormick, because Dan tends to start at wing forward but work his way back down the field and back up, and I think the way Sean Murphy handled Danny Sutcliffe in the group game in Leinster, I think he's the sort of guy that if he gets the ball further up the field, he can punish it. He's a really good sticksman. Whether it's Shane or Damien Reck, I think one of those will go on John McGrath. I think Paddy Foley probably on Niall O'Mara, and Simon Donoghue possibly on Ford if he's out in the corner. So that's the way I reckon that will go. I was very interested in how Wexford, they brought everyone in a straight line for the puck outs, because Pádraig Walsh was in there as sweeper, and it's easier as a sweeper if a long ball comes in and you've time to, you've a few seconds to run either side. But if everyone's spread out for the puck outs, but if everyone is straight down the middle and you're a spare man in the thick of all that, it's very hard for you to impact the game. So I'm wondering, will Wexford go long into the spare man again, or are you playing with fire with the likes of Paddy Maher and Ronan Maher ready to catch that ball? So it's always the conundrum in hurling, trying to figure out where can you get those percentages. Tipp probably lack pace in the back line, so you'd imagine if they fold inwards this time, they'll try and hit space or hit green patches on either side and get a bit of joy that way. I do make Wexford favourites for this game, and that's not just a Tipperary person just trying to build up the opposition. I think there's so much pace in the team, more than Tipperary for sure. Tipperary do have better sticksmen, but I think this will be a war zone around the middle. I think the numbers will be hugely populated in the middle. I think it's going to be probably Wexford are going to have a huge amount of guys in the middle, and it'll probably be like 4 versus 3 in Tipp's half of the field, and it'll be like 8 versus 7 or 7 versus 6 in the Wexford half of the field, meaning that the Tipp forwards will have very little space. There's not too many guys who you would say are very obviously ball winners, like a TJ Reid type guy, and I think that unless Tipperary find a way to rejig and try and sit the team back a little bit further and create a bit more space for the forward line, and even work the ball out with their short puck outs and find a way to expose Wexford in Tipp's half of the field and sort of draw them out, play ball short up the field, I think Tipp are going to be in a little bit of trouble there. But Tipp do have the hurlers, but like the thing is that I keep hearing all week is Tipp can't be as bad again. They'll come out fired, and they will be more fired up than they were for the Laois game. But the Limerick game has rocked them, and I don't know if too much has changed tangibly since the Munster final to now. If you look at the team, it's pretty much the exact same, albeit with Niall O'Mara starting. Otherwise, it's Cathal Barrett back into the team, obviously, because he was injured too, and that is a huge boost to the team. But it just seems like it's more or less back to square one with the Tipp team, and that's why I'm wondering, does that mean that Tipp improve massively from the Munster final? It's hard to know. Like, Wexford are on the crest of the wave, haven't lost all season, the only unbeaten team left in the championship. It just depends on whether winning the Leinster title goes to their head, if they got carried away, if they started to enjoy themselves a bit too much. But I think they've lots of hurling in that team, and more importantly, they have lots of pace. And I might be left with egg on my face, but I think that they have a very good chance of winning that game.